Okay, so I'm a bit of a World War II history geek, and recently I've been reading a lot about the Battle of Arnhem and Operation Market Garden, because its anniversary was just a couple of weeks ago. And I know a lot of people know about D-Day, but don't particularly know about this point in the war, so I thought I would share a bit of what I know with you, just in case you're interested in this sort of thing. Operation Market Garden took place a few months after D-Day, on the 17th of September. Now, Operation Market Garden was the brainchild of Field Marshal Montgomery, and the plan was to drop a bunch of airborne units into the Netherlands and take strategic points across the Rhine River so the Allies could make it into Germany from the north. Now, some people aren't really familiar with the geography of where this all took place, so I have an atlas because I'm old school. This with my fingers here, this is the United Kingdom, and that is Norfolk. Down here we have France, we have Belgium, this is the German border running up here, and this is the Netherlands, and this arrow I have placed here, that is Arnhem. Then slightly to the west is a place called Oosterbeek, where the Battle of Arnhem was also fought. So in Operation Market Garden, what they did is they dropped a bunch of airborne units, the American 101st Airborne, the American 82nd Airborne, the British 1st Airborne, who were supported by the Glider Pilot Regiment and the 1st Polish Independent Parachute Brigade. They dropped them into the Netherlands with the idea that they would seize these points going across the Rhine, rail bridges and road bridges. Then the British XXX Corps would come up from the south and reinforce them, and the Allies would make it over the Rhine together. But as we know, the best laid plans don't always work out. Operation Market Garden was regarded as a bit of a failure. They really didn't believe there was going to be much German resistance in the Netherlands. They thought it would be old men and boys on bicycles. But British intelligence said there were actually SS Panzer divisions being refitted in the area. There's a suggestion they might have known that before the operation took place, but really didn't pay much attention to it because they thought the Dutch resistance had been compromised. There's a story that a British officer got captured with the plans for the operation. I'm not sure if that's entirely true, I'd have to do a bit more research on that. The Polish were delayed by about 2 days because of weather. When they did finally drop in, the Germans knew they were coming, and a lot of them were shot before they reached the ground. And I read something that said the 101st Airborne actually lost a lot of men because the Germans were retreating from the British XXX Corps coming up from the south and were retreating into the 101st Airborne's line. The failure of Market Garden was really felt at the Battle of Arnhem. The 1st Airborne were dropped in really too far outside the city. Only a small group of them actually managed to make it in and seize the bridge. Another group of them were isolated off to the north. Now, these are paratroopers, they're very lightly equipped. They only had about 2 days' worth of rations. This was okay because the British XXX Corps were going to make it to Arnhem in 2 to 3 days. But of course, with all the delays, it meant that many of the Poles didn't actually make it to the city. The British XXX Corps didn't make it up to Arnhem at all. The men in the Battle of Arnhem ended up fighting for 9 days, a week longer than they were supposed to be there, surrounded by the injured and the dying. A lot of men in the Battle of Arnhem and all throughout Operation Market Garden actually had to be handed over to the Germans because they were so badly injured and there just wasn't the medical support to take them away from the front line. After this 8-9 day period of fighting, Operation Market Garden was called off and replaced with something called Operation Berlin. The troops were basically pulled out overnight so the Germans wouldn't see them go. But of course, a lot of men were captured and a lot of men were out of radio contact, never heard about Operation Berlin, so a lot of them got trapped behind enemy lines. The Battle of Arnhem and Operation Market Garden overall saw a great loss of men. The 1st Airborne, who fought in Arnhem, it was actually their first battle as a collective division. They ended up making it back to Britain with only about a quarter of their men because so many had been killed or captured by the Germans or were still trapped behind enemy lines. A lot of these men, along with men who managed to retreat from Arnhem but didn't make it out in Operation Berlin, they managed to hide out with the Dutch resistance, and about a month later 140 men, most of them 1st Airborne, managed to escape in something called Operation Pegasus. But that's a whole other story, and I'll talk to you about that in a video in about 2 or 3 weeks' time on the anniversary.